Hello and welcome to the Beyond podcast, where Richard Torres, an executive advisor, skilled diplomat, and retired Brigadier General with combat aviation experience, will discuss with Nihad how his two careers in the military and corporate America allowed him to bring his unique leadership style to the boardroom. Now let's listen for great insights from two leaders with a shared passion for empowering people and designing and maintaining positive corporate cultures.
Good morning, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm good, Nihad, and good afternoon to you as well. Obviously, we're on different sides of the continent, right? I'm on the East Coast, you're on the West.
Yes, connecting all the way from Vancouver Island. And very happy to have you here with me today. Welcome to the Beyond podcast. And before we dive into our favorite subject, I would like for you to share with the audience a little bit more about your journey.
Well, thank you for that. And I will start by saying I've had the pleasure of following two separate paths in my journey, right? One comes from my background and my upbringing as what's called an Army brat, and I can explain that more later. But for the most part, I have two careers. One was as that culminated into a senior military officer in the United States Army. And then the other career was on the corporate side. And I value all the lessons that I've learned through both those separate careers. And certainly the honor of serving my country at the highest levels and leading soldiers at the same time. I believe that it gave me a unique insight that we're going to share here on a specific topic.
Richard, you and I have been collaborating for the past few years. You were a client. And today I want to ask how you would contribute to a culture of collaboration.
Thank you for that, Nihad. I want to kind of build a picture around what we're going to talk about. And for the most part, and I kind of came to this realization, probably within the last 10 years. And that's that I don't have a good feeling that the people we rely on to manage other people are being taught how to manage. And it's interesting because in the way I came through my lessons in management and leadership, and let's kind of talk about that, right? We're talking about management when we talk about the corporate world, but we talk about leadership when we talk about the military world, right? But in essence, they both do the same thing, right? We're still, from a leadership standpoint, you're still trying to influence others to do something they wouldn't naturally do on their own. On the management side, you're just applying some functional organization to that management style. But ultimately, it turns into leadership, right? And for me, I grew up in that environment, right? Again, I told you I was brought up within a military family. My father served, my grandfather served, and so there were certain characteristics of that leadership that permeated everything that not only did my family did, but I did as a child in that, growing up in that environment. And then, of course, I chose to serve. And I then stepped into an environment within the military institution where leadership was part of the air that you breathed, right? It was everything that you did. It was, key to how we in the military would take, young men and women from where they're starting into becoming a leader themselves. Because the key to everything that the military does is that everyone must understand we're all leaders, right? I think, to me, that's one of the unique characteristics of the United States military, and one that maybe few other militaries adopt. And that is that everyone's a leader. From a private to a general, everyone's a leader. And that's what allows within the disruption of chaos for, when there's a vacuum of leadership, someone's going to step in and provide that leadership because they understand. Now, there's more to it than that, but I'm now, starting my own military service. I'm surrounded, now by, professionals who understand leadership, who teach leadership, who put leadership into context, who put leadership into action. And, we're frequently review, our leadership styles. And that's kind of how I went through my entire, not just, my entire military career, but not just, for me, because then I would then grow within that institution of leadership, right? From being taught to being one that assesses leadership, and then eventually to someone who's going to be mentoring and teaching others to lead. So that's kind of where I came from, and I didn't realize there was a difference. I just assumed because of how it was, where the environment that I was brought up in, and then the career that I had started in, that this was just natural for everybody. Does that help?
It does. And I want to add that early in my career, I had the privilege to collaborate with ex-military experts. They were in charge of security and logistics, and sometimes there were helicopter pilots in oil and gas bases. And many people think rigidity. My experience was adaptability, agility, and resilience. Do you agree?
I would agree with you, and I'll let you know why you were able to experience that. The military has been able to refine its ability to create leaders over many years, right? Many experiences, both in combat and also within what we call a garrison, or back in the barracks type environment. And through that, they've institutionalized our ability to train and develop leaders, right? So they've studied it. They understand the characteristics, right? I mean, and some of them that we can think of: duty, honor, country, right? Others such as loyalty, service, integrity, right? These are all things that we associate with leadership, and these are all defined in terms of values and characteristics associated with leadership. And so as we have gotten better as a military, what we've learned also is that leadership cannot go unchecked, right? It has to be managed. It has to be reviewed. It has to be discussed. There are important aspects, whether you're teaching leadership, coaching leadership, or mentoring leadership, and you're going to probably hear me say that some more: teach, coach, mentor. That all have an impact on how that leader develops their leadership or management style, right? And that's not to say, like any large organization, that there isn't going to be a bad apple along the way, right? And, once again, as a learning institution, the military figured out how to identify those traits that, you've probably heard as toxic leader, right? And, in the corporate world, it's just a bad manager. No one wants to work for a bad boss. But yes, leadership doesn't just happen. A lot of times you'll hear the term, "Oh, that's just a born leader." When truly, in fact, leadership is learned. It is given to others. It is taught to others, right? And then within a positive environment, you can identify your leadership, and you can grow. Rely on your strengths of your leadership and improve your weaknesses, because the entire process is based on those discussions. And again, I started by saying, I walked into an environment where the concept of leadership and leadership development was everywhere, right? And so, anyone coming into this institution knows that they're going to embrace those concepts. They're going to embrace those values and those characteristics, and they're going to try to become an example because we want them to do that. We tell them, you have to be an example, right? You have to live these characteristics and these values, and you have to be an example.
Since here at Aquans, we are a collaboration platform for seasoned executives and experts, I want to go back to my question around how would you design and maintain a collaborative culture?
I think first and foremost, what I would say is, collaborate, is the right term, right? Leadership or managing isn't something that is, part of a once a year review, or once a year discussion. It's something that has to be weaved into the culture of the team and people that you're managing or leading, right? And so, the military will do that a couple of ways, right? And outside of the one-on-one type discussions, right? When we have tasks that we're trying to complete, maneuvers, operations, whatever you want to call it, a lot of times we want to learn from every one of those, and we go through an after action report, and a big part of that after action report was how were decisions made, right? Why did we make those decisions? What was this other person thinking as you were making those decisions? How did they collaborate on what was happening? So like I said, it has to be integrated into every aspect of the work. Now, not to the point where you feel like you're losing time and effort towards what the primary goal or objective that you're trying to achieve, but it should be complementary to reaching those goals and objectives, because the corporate world isn't in the same business as the military, right? The corporate world is there to increase revenue, sell products, and hire employees, to get those things done, right? And so, in as much as I would want them to do more in terms of instilling better management or better leadership. It can't be something that is going to seem like another task that they have to accomplish. It has to be something that's woven into the fabric of the day-to-day work, that it just doesn't feel that way.
Yes, absolutely. We need to be intentional about culture and people. And we've seen a lot of interest on culture and people post-pandemic. And I must say that this is not something we improvise. This is not something leaders should improvise. We have to be intentional about it. And obviously, authenticity has to be part of the game. Because when there is no genuine investment, it does not work, right? We're not successful. It goes beyond beliefs and values and behaviors. It's about emotional and psychological safety as well. And again, it takes time, but people talk about it usually, and they like to talk about profitability and numbers. Well, I think we need to start by designing and maintaining a good culture, and everything else will follow.
I agree, and I'll tell you that when I started in the corporate world, again, I'm coming into it with all these things that I've learned about being a leader / manager, and I assumed everyone knew what I knew, right? And slowly but surely, I understood that wasn't the case. There were times where I was being selected to provide some training in those areas for obvious reasons. And it started to kind of create a picture that I was seeing. And then I started to associate my own experiences that now started to make me understand that no, in as much as someone is expected to manage at some point, they're not really given a whole lot of help to do that, right? In that you don't get too many questions in an interview that ask you about your management style, right? You might, get one, hey, how did you handle this scenario between two people, right? And that was a filler question, right? Because what they really want to know is what your skill set is, and does your skill set, match, the position that they're trying to hire for. So you don't really get it, right? And then you get hired, and you come to a new company, and they're happy to have you, and you're happy to be there because you get to do, what the job, description said you'd be doing, and they'll tell you about the company and its culture, and they'll tell you about, their values and stuff, but there's nothing in there, right? No, and it's and unless this person finds a way to look beyond what's right in front of them in terms of tasks and responsibilities, they're not going to see that, hey, I need to get some training here, right? On how to manage people, on how to manage tasks, on how to be a leader, right? Because all of a sudden they're going to find themselves in one of those management positions. And if you look at an org chart for any corporate organization, what you see is all those people in leadership positions. And guess what? Even though it might be near the bottom part of the org chart, you're a manager. You're someone that they expect to communicate and to put into context, the company strategy and vision and objectives and goals for the company and for your department head and for your supervisor and so on and so forth. But yet none of those people are helping you with how to improve your management, because they're more worried about getting tasks and objectives completed.
Personally, I can't even consider not mentoring and coaching on the job. But again, to your point, we have to be intentional about developing and supporting our future leaders. And that should happen at every single level of the organization. And what are the mechanisms? Figure out the mechanisms, figure out a way to empower new managers and the people who will take over. So it should really go hand in hand with career pathing and succession planning. But I know for a fact that for many organizations, this is not formalized. So it is a concern, because how do you inspire people around you if you don't have the tools, if you don't have the support you need, if your manager or your leader is not showing you the way?
Well, there's a lot of people in these leadership positions, these management positions in the corporate world, that are desperately trying to find some help, right? They're looking for ways to improve these skills because they know that they're important. Because, worst case scenario, they're going to run into a situation where it's not so much a technical task or a skill specific issue that's a problem, right? They're going to run into that scenario where it's a people problem, right? Or a multiple people problem. And they're going to realize that they don't know the people that they're managing. And they're trying to find out ways to do this, especially in today's remote environment. It's even more of a challenge, right? You don't have the office environment to go by and have those discussions. You're going to try and do this over a Zoom call. And we know that that works to some extent, but we also know that it's really the face-to-face, right? So that they can see your sincerity, so that they can, read your body language and understand that you're really invested in who this person is and how you can help them.
This is a good segue because my next question was about how you go about building trust in the military. Let's face it, when you're out in the field, the way you depend on each other will never compare to what we do in the corporate world. So I can't wait for you to share more about how you go about building trust in the military.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from what I've learned as shared experience, right? So when things get a little tough, right? Maybe the company isn't doing as well as it wanted to in this quarter or some other, right? It's a shared experience. It's now not talking about the values and the characteristics of being a leader. It's actually doing them. Yeah, it's actually being there for someone and saying, hey, I know this has got to be done. This project needs to be done by the end of the week. But hey, boss, I've got some family issues and some family things that are happening right now. I need to take some time to address these things. Can we work something out, right? And this is it, right? This isn't the boss freezing up and feeling, the stress from on higher. This is a boss going, I understand, right? I understand what you're challenged with, what you're dealing with. And yes, please take that time to kind of work all this through. We need you to make sure you're comfortable, that your family is okay, and that we know that, if your family is good and happy and productive, that you're going to be even that much more of a productive employee. And I want you to take that time to go take care of things so that when you do come back, I'll go back to the boss and tell him that we need more time, and we'll do that. See, that's now, right? Someone's now embracing, management and leadership and showing it to someone else, feeling their compassion, and we're all moving together. Shared experience.
So, like telling the person you are coaching and mentoring and building up, I'll have your back no matter what, right? Now, let's talk about crisis management. You gave an example about a company who didn't reach its objectives for a couple of quarters. And of course, leadership is in crisis management, working on contingency plans and probably thinking of cutting costs, right? And let's talk about the military, because crisis, you've been trained to deal with crisis. So based on my experience, I think that that's where the value is. How to operate when things are not okay. And that's really when it matters, actually, right?
It's so important that, a manager's skills as a manager have to start day one, right? You have to set those examples of who you are as a manager / leader, and you have to have those shared experiences, to prove, right, to kind of reinforce that this is the behavior that we want everyone to do, so that when you do get to those discussions about important tasks that lead to business objectives, right? Now they become more attainable because you've proven your sincerity, your concern, and they're going to trust you. They're going to trust you that by influencing this person to invest their time to get this accomplished, because you've already proven yourself in all these other areas, that they're going to be there for you.
I want to add that we have within our team members fantastic executive coaches, but also we are very intentional about culture. We're intentional about the way we help leaders, we help our clients. So we do leverage a tool that was invented by the US Air Force in the 40s, behavioral science, data, and AI. And we are very intentional in the way we leverage that tool and in the way we combine our experience to support our clients.
There's one thing in particular that I want to share about that, and that is not just with this scenario that you're referring to, but in a few others that I look back in my past that have happened. But with the current one that you're referring to right now, it became more obvious to me, which was as an end around move, right? The corporation will try to provide or implement management training, whether it's through a review process, right? Make it a couple of objectives within that scope, or that they've got a specific template within the HR system that they want the managers to follow. And that what I realized at that point was, wait a minute, this isn't my management style. This isn't my leadership style. This is some corporate entity that made some decisions about what managers should be doing or not doing and said, boom, there you go. Now, unfortunately, the problem with that is that it sets the wrong example. It doesn't allow for someone to explore their own management style,
Great discussion. If you had to leave the audience with one thought, what would that be?
I want to leave the audience with just 3 simple words: teach, coach, mentor. Right? We as leaders need to give back, continually give back. Right? Whether we gained our leadership style or management style, from some education system or some experience, you have to give back. So you have to teach what you've learned, teach those experiences, teach the pros and the cons, right? And then after you teach it, it's not over. You got to coach it, right? We see this in sports all the time, right? Coaches that are out there making sure that what they taught their players how to do, they're actually doing the right way. And as they get better, or maybe not so much, they make those spot corrections. And that's what coaching is all. Teaching and coaching. The last one, mentoring, comes later, right? You've now moved on to this job or that job. The people that you've been teaching and coaching have moved on to this job or that job. But guess what? They reach back out. They find you and they say, hey, I've had this situation. I was wondering if you can help me with it. That's mentoring. When you start to get into that scenario where the people that you've made an impression on because you taught them and you coach them, and now they want help because they're in the position that you were in before, that's mentoring.
Thank you for the great discussion, Richard. Teaching means a lot because my mother is a lifelong teacher. And in the end, it's about servant leadership. It was great recording this podcast episode with you. Thank you.
My pleasure, Nihad.